be really honest with you guys, this is really weird. Like, I wrote an opening for how we would start this video. I just can't do it. Like, it's bizarre for Hunter and I to be here in this
situation.
Capacity. Just to be here in general and talk about this.
It feels like I'm giving a eulogy.
Yeah, basically. Like, my grandfather died and I made a video about it, and this is kind of like, this is a tier underneath how I felt when I made that video. So, Rooster Teeth is shutting down, but there's a lot more to it than what the drama channels have covered so far, and Hunter and I wanted to do a video where we give you guys all the information we have, discuss our feelings. Like, this is not our usual peppy content, right? Like, I don't know if you guys know, I'm a musical theater performer. I consider Hunter and I do a show, right? You know, a show, right? Like, this is not a show today. This is Calxiyn
I'm only
and Hunter.
kept around for my,
you know,
in my ability and place as comedic relief.
Yeah, like the clown, the gesture and everything, right? And so we're not doing that today. Like, we're just talking to you guys. And I want to mention two things before we start. This is not some weird parasocial. Cal and Hunter are clearly too
overly
obsessed and overly obsessed in these people you don't know. I cannot stress enough that Hunter and I, people may not know this, we are friends with people that work there. We have friends that work there, and we have friends that used to work there, hoping to come back, like they worked in a contract capacity, and they're hoping to come back, and they will never work there again. And that's really sad for them. We feel for them, but it's sad for us to see them go through that. These aren't strangers going through it. I mean, I think you should have empathy for strangers anyway, but these are our friends, right?
I mean,
these are people I talk to on a regular basis.
Criticisms of parasocial relationship aside, I think that it's perfectly natural to feel a certain degree of grief for what other people are going through, and to see Rooster Teeth go away. Like, that's understandable, but
but this is a lot more personal for us than that. It's not like the parasocial relationship. I feel my
Bernie
best friend, my best friend Barbara Dunkelman. Like, it's not like that. I have actual friends that work there, and you know, the other reason, just personally for me, is that I don't know if you guys know this either, but I mentioned this probably before, is that my mom lost her job under very similar circumstances over Christmas in December, at the end of December, and I'm just not, like, in the mood. Like, I'm not in the mood to suffer any fools, because just seeing what she has to deal with and knowing that that is magnified on the scale of 150 other people, some of them we know. Like, I know that
some of them had been working there for their entire adult life. Like, you look at someone like Barbara Dunkelman or Gavin Free, like, they were teenagers when they started.
Exactly, like they know nothing else. And we know that I
can only imagine how devastating that would be.
Yeah, and like, we know that there's no such thing as a good company, but there are better places to work and there are worse places to work.
And at the end of the day, it was meaningful for those people, and regardless about how we may or may not feel and our level of cynicism about corporations, it's real for them, and I don't think it's appropriate for us to step on their toes.
Yeah, absolutely not. Like, just based on how the staff spoke in that live stream, like, their sentiment, I can't stress enough how they already have to deal with this psychological, the financial, the emotional heartache, like not being able to sleep at night because you don't know how you're gonna pay your bills, and just the constant rejection. Like, obviously working in an entertainment profession, I go to auditions all the time and I'm rejected all the time. I've gone to probably like 50 musical theater auditions in my entire span of being a professional, and I've gotten rejected before. But it's just, you think that that's almost for entertainment, and then you realize that when somebody like my mom loses her job, that the rejection actually extends past you're auditioning for something. You are constantly rejected when you're job hunting, and knowing that that constant rejection is in your future, knowing that you're never going to be able to work with all your friends again, and then you have these people harassing you and belittling you on Twitter replies after losing your job in a very public way. And so I'm just not the person to, if you want to be negative on your own Twitter accounts, that's fine.
That's your
but
prerogative.
If you direct that under this video, I wouldn't try it. So anyway, so let's get into actually
the chronology of what had happened
the news now. So on Wednesday, a Variety article was posted that said Rooster Teeth was biting the dust after more than 2 decades. My mom was so pissed when she heard that, by the way. I know that they're making a joke. I know know that it's a,
It's a
cockbite, right? Ha, ha.
Rooster
I didn't
Teeth,
think it was very
I mean, it's a
funny.
silly name for a company, and I get it.
I wasn't.
Maybe that's a self-inflicted wound, but like,
maybe they
tone,
laughed. I don't know.
Tone variety.
I'm just like, oh well,
Tone.
that's funny that 150 people just lost their jobs.
Like, you're
guess,
a news organization.
You're a news article.
You're going through a lot of like
drama alert, bestie. I don't know. I just thought
you're
that
going
was
through a lot of like layoffs and cutbacks as well. Like,
yeah, I did not appreciate it. But a lot of people thought it was fake because it was out of nowhere. A lot of us just saw the article. There were people that are like hardcore, like cynical Rooster Teeth in my Discord server. Like, they're like, this company one day is going to crumble, but they didn't even believe it. They were like, no, it's fake. It's definitely fake. Like, it wouldn't happen like this. It's totally fake.
A fun little anecdote. I was walking my dog Wednesday, and I was in the middle of a field when I got a call from Cal, and typically Cal just texts me a lot.
Yeah, we don't really voice call each other.
We text a lot, and so I was kind of surprised. I'm like, oh, what happened?
Last time I called you, my grandfather died. So I think
when I asked, I was like, hey, what's up? And she was like, what's good? And it was like, very little
Nothing is good.
And I'm like, oh God, did someone die? And she was like, yes, Rooster Teeth. And I remember I had a genuine surprised Pikachu moment of like, my mouth was agape. And I'm standing in this field.
And then we brought Arnold into the call.
I also had that brief moment of like, no, this has to be some kind of joke, some kind of like, obviously,
April Fool's is a whole month away.
I love Rooster Teeth from the bottom of my heart. It has affected me very positively, and I have very warm feelings for what they have produced. But even I understood that they were in a decline. They were in a financially difficult space. Even still, I didn't buy it right away. It was a real shock for both of us.
Because they had announced things.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
weirdly,
they were changing things. Like, they had
things
just
looked like on the up and up.
Camp under, like, YouTube membership, so it seemed like that they were trying to ramp up their, like, patronage or, like, the way that people could support them, right? And so it was just very shocking to see it happen all of a sudden when it seemed like, I don't know, it's almost like it's a fictional sort of story about a character getting their shit together, but then it's too late. Like, Eurydice and Orpheus are walking out of the cave, and then at the last moment, Orpheus looks back at her, and you were almost there. You were just
in this case, is Hades Warner Brothers Discovery?
I think
Hades
so.
is Warner Brothers Discovery.
But the Variety article, that's the one that I read first. There were some other ones, but that's the one I saw. So it went in Rooster Teeth's history. It shared the memo from Jordan Levin, and maybe I'll put that up on the screen. He's the general manager. Some people call him the CEO. Whatever. He's the head of Rooster Teeth.
He's the big guy.
The memo was very long, but it didn't tell us anything. It was for the employees, right? So it was about, here's everything you guys did over the amount of years that Rooster Teeth ran. Like, it wasn't for us. It was for the employees, right? And so it wasn't answering many questions. We just knew that Rooster Teeth was shutting down. So Wednesday, Social Media Wednesday was absolute. Wednesday's my day off. I only have one day off a week. Because I work for 12 hours on my YouTube channel, right? Because I have no other form of income. So Wednesday's the only day a week that I decide to take off. And it was like looking at like a car crash. Like, I couldn't close Twitter because I was so just mesmerized by looking. Like, when something bad happens and you're just watching the constant, like, news story of it, I don't know. It was just impossible to look away, right? I misreported something, and I'm sorry. I saw somewhere that 400 employees were laid off. Apparently, I don't know how that information circulated, but I should have done better. That's my bad. It's actually 150 full-time employees. But of course, there's contractors like the voice actors, or say Casey Lee Williams, who makes the music for RWBY, and they're not considered full-time employees, so I wonder if it was like supposed to be full-time plus contract was how some people got up to 400. I don't know, but the point is that there's 150 full-time employees, but you also have to consider that for the contractors, that this is a portion of income that I'm assuming they don't rely on, because Casey said that Rooster Teeth was never enough to pay her bills, which is understandable. It's like one album every so-and-so, like every couple of years, right? But it's still a portion,
and she has
right?
her own Patreon, and
she just launched her Patreon, but that was still a portion of income that those people were relying on. It's again like how I referenced my mom. They have contractors that make graphics or write website copy, and those people were fucked over too. Like, it's still something definitely to think about. So Wednesday was a total shit show because people were speculating about RWBY. Of course, we focus on RWBY. Hunter knows about more the achievement hunter side, and she'll talk about all of that.
More of the Rooster Teeth, non-animated side.
You know, RWBY, I think, like, again, no disrespect to any other portion of the company, but like, I think, to be honest, RWBY is one of those things that everything else can burn, but RWBY needs to come out of the fire. Like, I think that that's how a lot of people genuinely feel with some of the other stuff, like Achievement Hunter and now Dog Bark and all of that stuff. Like, I think that people have accepted that those things would end eventually, or some of the things that people, I guess I should say, some of the things that people already liked have ended a long time ago. Like Bernie is gone and whatever, like that sort of stuff. And so, but RWBY is not, it was very much still, we were still kind of here. So I think that RWBY was the biggest concern for a lot of people, but most people, what I saw anyway, was like minimal hate, but most of it, like, I think the support was a lot more than I think the Rooster Teeth employees thought, you know, because like usually whenever Rooster Teeth is in the news, it's not for a good reason, but people were really, you know, torn up about this and like retweeting the statements from the employees, trying to show them support, talking about the impact the company had, how people were sad to see that this was happening. And so people like Ludwig and like Moist Critical, they made their videos. I didn't watch the Moist Critical video, but I did watch the Ludwig one. And there wasn't a lot of like dancing on the grave of Rooster Teeth. It's still the sentiment that Rooster Teeth still inspired an entire generation of content creators. And Ludwig said something that I think was really like poignant, that most content creators will stop on their own terms. Like you have MatPat right now, like Game Theory, right? Yeah. He is choosing, he's making a choice. He wants to spend more time with his family. He is making the choice to stop, but then Game Theory will live on with a new host.
There's the difference between getting out when you're on top and then having to like slowly burn out and getting
it's
kicked
not
out,
even
not
like
on your terms.
About on top or not on top either, because there were people that had been recently brought into Rooster Teeth that were doing well. For those people, they were probably on top even if the company itself wasn't in its prime. They've had their scandals, and Hunter and I, if you think that we're like Rooster Teeth shills, you're so wrong. Like we were on the ground when the Genlock stuff had come up. Like we were in the trenches of trying to interview former employees and find out about that sort of thing.
And a lot of former employees have made videos, like Alana. A lot of people that had left the company, including Miles Luna, had publicly stated that, like, hey, there were dark times, right? It wasn't a perfect company. I left for a reason, but it was still a very important part for me and a part of my life.
I think, too, that this is something that Ludwig had stressed, that the culture did shift internally because Warner Brothers installed Jordan Levin. I say installed because I think it's funny, but they basically, like, that's what they did. They brought in, and we'll talk about this more later, but they brought in Jordan Levin because of previous leadership's poor decisions, and they decided, we don't need a founder, we need somebody who has actual experience, like corporate experience, to clean this shit up, especially, again, after Genlock, Genlock. I think that the reason why they did that was specifically because of Genlock.
You know, in retrospect, we'll discuss this a little later, but in retrospect, Genlock kind of was...
Genlock is is not the only problem, but it's a very good representation of the problems that the company has, right?
They were spending more money than they had. They were living outside their means.
Yeah, and just...
We'll get into that more later.
Again, like, Genlock, I'm not saying that it was all Genlock's fault particularly, but Genlock is a good representation
of the
workplace culture, but also just spending all this money on stuff like big name voice actors and just that, the problems. It has all of the problems, probably, that have ever existed in one big nucleus. I think what's also helping Rooster Teeth, like, first of all, there's the idea that the culture shifted. Like, Jordan Levin, tried his best to get them on the right track, but the views itself never bounced back. So there's that, right? That, Ludwig's sentiment, and I'm sure that this is the sentiment of a lot of people, is that Rooster Teeth tried to change, but maybe it was just too late for them. But they did try, and that's why people are being sympathetic. I think what also helps, though, recently, is that Warner Brothers is the bigger villain of the day, because they have been assassinating art recently.
Right? The two big examples I can think of recently is that they shelved complete films, the DC Batgirls film, and then the new live action animated mix. Looney Tunes
I think
film.
that's probably because there have been other things like Warner Brothers tax writing off, like things that have been done,
like
but
closing, like shutting off a bunch of animated shows,
and hearing how good that movie sounds like it was. And the fact that they want to sell it, but they don't want to sell it because they're afraid that if it does well for someone else, they'll be embarrassed. Like, just the ego and the arrogance. Like, it's not even... Because there's one thing when something seems like a ruthless business decision, but it's another thing when something seems like blatant arrogance in terms of, like, we were willing to sell it, but actually, now that it's hit social media, we don't want to be embarrassed if we sell it to a competitor and it actually does well, so we'll just get rid of it. Like, that's a decision of ego. Because, in my opinion, right, also, you know, in my collection of degrees I also have a communications degree, like public relations. If I were Warner Brothers, my ad campaign would be like, we heard you, like, you found the defendant innocent, because the whole movie with the Looney Tunes is a court or something. I don't know exactly what the plot is, but, like, it's a court. It was the
Wile E. Coyote was suing Acme.
Yeah, so I would have done a whole, like we have found the defendant innocent, like, you, the jury, have decided that this movie should be released. That would be my ad campaign. That is how I would market this. It's like, you, the public, decided that this movie was worth saving, so the gracious Warner Brothers, right? Like, because then you're the good guy, and then everybody wants to go. Anyway, so they were just, they need me in there, really, because I would have fixed, I could fix them.
Really, most people weren't focusing on Rooster Teeth as the villain.
No.
They were focusing on
there
Warner
were
Brothers
bigger fish to fry, and I think that the fact that Warner Brothers has been doing some bad things recently is really a point in Rooster Teeth's favor, especially because that Rooster Teeth seemed to kind of be getting their act together recently, and that, you know, Warner kind of had the idea that it was too little, too late. But anyway, so Thursday, that was Wednesday. It's been 3 days. It's only been 3 days. I feel like that it's been a long 3 days. Months right now. It's been a long 3 days. So Thursday's when we actually got the live stream, and I made an entire Twitter thread on the live stream. The live stream's not up anymore. It disappeared. They did say that they would send an email explaining what they said in the live stream, but I made a live Twitter thread, and so if you want to read that. There was some confusion about how the staff found out. They explained that they did an internal live stream so that they could tell people personally, but then for the people that they couldn't reach, they sent out the memo, and I don't know if they sent the memo to Variety in advance or if it got leaked. They didn't really explain that, but basically they
Someone was like, I will sell this to Variety because I don't have a job and I can use the scratch. We don't really know, right? And so I'm not sure if they sent it beforehand. And it sucks that people like Casey or the other RWBY VAs found out through Twitter, but ultimately, something that you guys need to understand, and I know that people are upset, and I understand that's a justifiable criticism to be like, they're contractors, but still, that's the part that feels impersonal, but the memo was leaked or released very shortly after the employees were told. I'm sure that if it had been private for longer, let's say it's Chelsea's job because she's the head of community at Rooster Teeth, right? I don't know if she also handles all their internal communication stuff, but I'm assuming she does. Like, she just lost her job too, you know? And so I understand people don't seem to have a lot of empathy for that. I understand people on Twitter are angry to see people like Casey, and especially like Neith. He was saying that he only found out recently too, like that they found out through social media, but they need to focus on the employees that are in-house so that they just lost their livelihoods, right? Like, they just lost their jobs. Chelsea especially has a lot of people to be communicating with, right? And she just lost her job too. I'm not saying it's all on her, but I'm just using her as an example. You have to consider the fact that anybody who would have told Casey is also out of a job now, and so there's a lot going on internally as well, and it's only added to the fact. See, if they had been sitting on this for like weeks or something, that would be a different story. But the memo was leaked like literally right after the internal meeting had happened, because it's let's just say that their workday starts at 9 o'clock. Okay, this happened at 12 o'clock our time, which means it was 11 for them. So they had been 3 hours into the workday, like, from this internal meeting, and then the memo leaked, right? Like 3 hours into the day. Yeah, it was a very tight secret, and then when it released to the wider public, then it releases to the world.
Yeah, and so it wasn't like that they had known for months and just decided to let people find out on Twitter. It happened in a very sudden way where they needed to think about how they were going to proceed and deliver the news, right? And so yesterday during the live stream, we did get some answers on some things. So depending on what the project is, Warner Brothers is willing to negotiate for those projects to be continued by the talents independently. And this is where I'm going to make a presumption. And so please, if I'm incorrect about anything, like, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I'm trying to kind of dissect the corporate speak of that, right? And I'm not familiar with their systems, but I am familiar with the corporate lingo added. Like, okay, so here's what I'm assuming they mean. If Barbara, let's say, wants to do Always Open, it sounds like the reason why it's a negotiation is that Barbara would need to buy back the license or the IP or whatever, the name, the brand. And that, I don't know if they would even need to buy it back, but since they said negotiation, I'm assuming that that's what they're saying, is that there is an opportunity for the talent to take back the things that they have under specific conditions. Maybe that specific condition is making sure, like, to mention that you're not affiliated with Warner Brothers anymore. Maybe it's buying back the channels or the names. We don't know, right? And so I'm assuming that that's what they mean by that when they say that, even Death Battle, based on some of their vague tweets, I think that that's what they're trying to do too.
Well, so, because Death Battle, I know this because I've been around for a very long time. Death Battle used to be owned and run by a company called Screw Attack, which was also purchased by Fullscreen the time that Rooster Teeth was purchased by Fullscreen. And eventually, for, I guess, just convenience sake, they stripped Rooster Teeth of everything that was valuable of it and dumped the rest of the brand, and all of that brand got integrated,
like merged
together, integrated into the Rooster Teeth brand. So Death Battle has already survived the death of one company. It's entirely possible they'll survive another.
So I'm assuming that what they meant was that Warner Brothers is open, like, they're not like, and we keep Death Battle and it disintegrates into dust. It sounds like that there's an openness to negotiate something so that the people that made these things can continue to make them if they want to, and somehow get the rights to their thing. And, though, okay, so we're talking about, like, stuff that is Rooster Teeth owned, I don't know, I guess, like Immersion, I don't know, right? That's Rooster Teeth owned stuff. But there are podcasts that are part of the Roost network, and it's a bit of a different circumstance for them because Warner Brothers is trying to sell the entire network. And the clarification in terms of the live stream was not very good in terms of what the Roost actually is. Jordan Levin explained that the Roost is a podcast network, and that's not a public-facing brand. That's what they call it internally. But basically what Ludwig explained is that he's part of the Roost somehow, or he knows someone, I can't remember exactly, and that the Roost secures ads for the podcast. I'm guessing they mean ad reads, as in, this video is sponsored by Calxyn's Patreon.
Someone needs to get the ads
on Patreon,
right?
right?
They do that backwork stuff, and podcasting is obviously booming and has been booming for a very long time.
Like a manager. If I had a manager and that manager got me a sponsorship for us to put in our video. So they are basically trying to sell the Roost. Let's pretend Spotify bought the Roost. The podcast would now have a job under Spotify, but otherwise, they said in the stream that the Roost will join them in unemployment land, and that's what they said in the stream, so I can say it. And then maybe if the Roost people are in the same situation, that they would also have the option to negotiate for their podcast brands or what have you. But it kind of doesn't sound like that the brands are even owned by Warner Brothers. It sounds more like the Roost is just a talent agency, basically, like ad agencying for them. Ludwig did not go into that too much. But everybody really wants to know what's going on with RWBY and the other animation. I'm pretty sure that's... I don't know how long this video is going to be, because I am going to try to edit it, but that's why everybody's here, probably. If you're watching this video, it's okay. I don't care. What about RWBY, right? So, Camp is already done. The episodes that they had for Season 5 of Camp, they're going to continue to be aired. I'm not sure what Hunter and I are doing about Camp, to be perfectly honest with you. We'll wait a couple of more days. We'll look into that and we'll figure it out in terms of reacting to Camp, because a lot of people have asked. Carrie said that they are going to release the RWBY Beyond content that was announced a few months ago, which means RWBY Beyond, the epilogue, etc., and that Carrie has been doing the same thing that he was always doing, which was negotiating with partners about Volume 10, and that there are meetings that were scheduled before Wednesday that are still going to happen. So I said this on Twitter, and some people came at me sideways because they didn't understand what I meant, but I said this on Wednesday, that RWBY is in the same position it's always been in. They need partners to fund Volume 10. They still need partners fund Volume 10.
If anything, it might be the case that RWBY's in a slightly better position.
Yeah.
Because they don't have, because like now you can just own it outright and do what you wish with it. You don't have to worry about working with a partner, which might complicate things and might...
Like, basically say, Crunchyroll doesn't want to work with Warner Brothers, now they can work, but maybe they're still willing to work with RWBY, they can set up their own animation studio situation, I don't know, right? And so we don't know about all that, is what we're at now. But yeah, I mean, Hunter, you do have a point, though, that maybe RWBY will look more attractive to some people, because there's always, like, you have to share... Some people don't like to share. Some people would rather have the whole thing.
Like, right? I might be wrong. It might not be, but from an outsider's perspective, there might be a distinct possibility that it's a marginal improvement.
Crunchyroll anime have been interesting sometimes, right?
I've watched all of High Guardian Spice, so I know how bad it can get.
And I don't want to make too many assumptions again, because I don't know any. This is not my area of expertise, right? But here's what I'm going to say, and take this with a grain of salt. If a company like Crunchyroll bought the IP to RWBY, it would only make sense that they try to rehire not only the writers, but the animators who have already worked on RWBY if they intend to continue Volume 10, because it is very expensive to train people. And so there is no benefit to purchasing the IP and then tossing everyone out and getting new writers. That's a much bigger risk than just, here's where we left off, reduce the scope a little, right?
Alternatively, my concern with that, and I have several concerns about RWBY, and I guess
we have several concerns.
This is the RWBY portion of the video, so I guess I'll just push out all of my RWBY feelings.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about it more as the news progresses too, but yeah.
There's a difference between Rooster Teeth having RWBY as their, like, the point of their spear, of having it be, like, their tentpole, of it being, like, their biggest show, and then a larger corporation that RWBY is maybe not as important to them. Because, like, will RWBY be as important to Crunchyroll as, like, My Hero Academia or Attack on Titan or all these other anime are?
I do know what you mean.
So
I kind of see that in the reverse way, though. That
but
there's
like,
all this pressure for, but RWBY needs to succeed because RWBY is the only thing between us and bankruptcy, right? So it may actually be a better situation if it's not the tip of the spear,
maybe,
and it's instead.
But it's also like, are you willing to, like, maybe cut corners and not get the best animators and all of this stuff? You know, it's a possibility.
Right.
I also feel that for most of television's history...
we're gonna talk about television's history.
For most of television history, the amount of money a show made was relative to the amount of popularity it had. Because you ran ads on the show, you could demand more money from advertisers if more people were watching your show. A show that got 1 million eyeballs would make less money than a show that got 10 million eyeballs.
Yeah.
But now with streaming, and RWBY is a streaming show that primarily it has not been since at least Volume 4, primarily supported via ads.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Volume 5, primarily supported via ads. Has been in the situation where it's only funded by subscriptions.
Yeah.
That's partially why most seasons of television don't have as many episodes as they used to. Because it used to be like, well, this is a popular show, have as many episodes as humanly possible, because then we get more money.
As long as people keep watching, we can continue,
But now it's like, well, you're kind of at a disadvantage if you make a bunch of episodes, because then it costs more money to make the show. And you still want a popular show, but you want it to be as cheap as possible, because you have that hard ceiling of this is how much money we make from our subscriptions.
Yeah.
Right?
And YouTube ads, like, we're never doing it for RWBY.
We're never doing it for RWBY.
So it's not their fault in that sense. I think it's more that I think that they realized maybe a little bit too late that they basically wanted to apply a Netflix model to Rooster Teeth in general. But something that we need to keep in mind is that Netflix has been at a loss the same way as YouTube for a really long time.
For Netflix, for the entire time they've been a streaming giant, they have been at a loss.
Because you know, and I don't know if this is a conspiracy or if this is true, but Hunter's favorite conspiracy, which is probably true, is that YouTube and Netflix are basically waiting to become the monopoly and then start like YouTube
prices.
Premium is $14. I've been using YouTube Premium for years. You don't get it free if you're a YouTuber, unfortunately. I feel like you should if you're get it anyway. But, so like I use YouTube Premium. If YouTube Premium went from $14 to $20, probably would still use YouTube Premium. That's how they get you. They want to wait until there's no other option, and then Netflix is going to be like $100 a month, like cable, right?
And that is the model. That is what's commonly referred to as the Silicon Valley model. That's what Uber did. Uber rides used to be a lot less expensive, and then they hiked dramatically when they basically killed the taxi industry.
Yeah.
And that's, but to get back to my statement, that's why, like, most shows on Netflix don't get more than 3 seasons. Because after 3 seasons, you have to start paying people more. And it doesn't behoove you to make more of a show because then it's more expensive. Yeah, for the really big tentpoles that bring people in, they'll maybe do a couple more seasons. But still, not as much as it used to be.
And so
and fewer episodes.
Rooster Teeth always needed a content creator model as opposed to a streaming model,
and with RWBY, like, can you name another streaming animated show that got 9 seasons?
Yeah, I know.
Can't.
It's really
difficult. Nothing that Netflix has produced, nothing that anybody has produced purely for streaming has gotten as many episodes as RWBY.
Yeah.
So RWBY is kind of an anomaly. Like, that's not how you run a show nowadays, especially an animated show that's very expensive.
Because you obviously you have Japanese anime.
Yeah, but that goes on. But that goes on television.
Right?
They still run ads, and even then, like, anime now, like, typically
if
back
you're not
in the day,
One Piece, like, anime have been getting
shorter.
Yeah,
like, now the standard
slaughtered is what I was gonna say. But
because now the standard is like 12 to 13 episodes in a season.
And
back
then
in the day, it was 24.
People to the manga, right?
It's regrettable, and so RWBY is in this really weird position where, like, if someone picks it up, are they willing to, like, go the distance with it?
Yeah.
Are they willing to put in to, like, as many seasons? They will? Like,
I think they would need, like, proper
because economically that's just not
like they would need like an actual how content creators structure their Patreon. That's what they would need to do. And they were so close. Like, they were just about, like, at least, you know, this is just my interpretation as far as I see things. I think that putting RWBY on Crunchyroll was the right choice. But now, you know, they were just about to, like, yeah, we're doing RWBY bonus content. We're doing that Patreon stuff, like the stuff that people like to pay for, like, behind the scenes and exclusive, right? And so they were just about to do that. So I think that what would need to happen, and I don't know if Crunchyroll would use Patreon because that's kind of weird, but maybe they would, I don't know. Like, I think that whoever buys RWBY, they would need to implement the Patreon, because that's, I think, where things fall apart, is that you're treating content, like the idea of content creation, like you treat TV streaming, and that just doesn't work. Like, for Hunter and I, our biggest revenue is Patreon. It's not going to be this video. It is, we are working in the hopes that one of you will be like, yeah, they seem cool, and I don't want them to be homeless. I'll give them $10 a month. That's what we're hoping, like, that's what we're hoping for. And I said this on Twitter, because some people were being, quite frankly, ridiculous, and I don't want to get into that too much, but a video to me, and, like, this may be, I don't know, mask off moment. It's not that I don't care about you guys. Every time you guys comment something, it gives me the motivation to continue working, but that doesn't mean that we'll have the funds to continue working. Those are two different things, right? So I'm never going to say, like, oh, if you don't give us money, you're useless, right? But the way that I see things is that posting a video is an advertisement for the Patreon, right? Every video we post, it's not the video in itself that makes the money. It's that every video we make is bait to lure someone into pledging us on Patreon. Or we made that Honkai commission recently. That commission could pay for groceries for an entire week's worth of groceries, right? Like, I'm not exaggerating. And so it's that one person that will be like, you know what? I have some disposable income. I want to see Cal and Hunter react to this anime. That's what we hope for, is that we post a video and there's just one dedicated person that wants to support. And, you know, okay, so this is going on a tangent, but this is something I plan to say.
This is a tangent on a tangent.
Tangent on a tangent. But I didn't particularly have a high opinion of Jordan Levin, okay? Like, not as a person, I don't know him personally, but in terms of, like, he was installed by Warner Brothers to clean up the absolute shitstorm that previous leadership had caused. At that time, I remember thinking, like they're bringing in this random old man. Like, sorry, Jordan Levin, if you're watching this, I don't know, are they gonna play it at Rooster Teeth today? So they, this old man that probably has never played a video game or have seen an anime like in his entire life, and he's just some corporate guy. But something that really just resonated with me, and something that I think I talked about this earlier too, that he said not to support companies. And a lot of people are taking what he said completely out of context. And it really, if you saw me on Twitter last night, I was really, really pissed. But he said he wasn't being like, you guys didn't give us enough money, so now we're shutting down and it's all your fault. What he said was that the only way to support your favorite content creators, whether it's the ones that are moving on from Rooster Teeth or content creators in general, is direct monetary support. That you should not support a company, never support the company, support the individuals.
Which is
right?
kind of what I wanted, which is the point I was making about RWBY.
Yeah.
Back to me. Which is that, like, the economics of making a show like that is so radically different now.
Yeah.
That, like, RWBY was an outlier, and it was kind of impossible to do it how they were doing it. The bottom has kind of fallen out off of advertisement. Like, you just can't really make a living on advertisement dollars alone anymore. You need sponsors, you need merchandise, you need direct patronage.
The only way you
and that's what he's referring to.
Right? Is... like, there are some people that make their money off of ads, but those people are like drama channels that post 10 times a day and just like come on and they commentate and then they post with barely any editing and then they get clicks because of rage bait. So this is something else I was trying to really stress on Twitter, okay? If you think like, but I watch and like I shouldn't need to pay and that's disrespectful to the people that can't afford it, and I understand that people can't afford it, but if you are saying that your viewership should be enough, what you are going to do is turn a content creator into a clout chaser, because what that content creator will see is that, oh, my fans are not willing to pay for what I do, so I need to rely on ads. How do you get more views? You post rage bait content, right? Like drama channel content that is very easy to make, and you just put it up and you're always the first one at the scene of the crime, right? And that is how you get stuff that people are not actually passionate about, but they're just posting and they're trying to chase virality.
And that's what's different. That's Rooster Teeth's greatest crutch. And that's what you see, because like YouTube, like over 10 years ago was decidedly different. Like there was sketch comedy and all these things that were a lot more involved and involved writing and all this. And nowadays the biggest thing, other than like these occasional people who do huge expensive things, is just commentary. Because that's really inexpensive.
Yeah.
Rooster Teeth was in a similar issue where back when they started, right, you made a lot of money on merchandise, you made a lot of money off of advertisement because the bottom hadn't fallen, like Google hadn't destroyed the entire advertising space and really shrunk the amount of money people made from advertisement. So the videos that they made, their early podcasts, their early sketches, their early animations, it was economically sound because the bar of what was acceptable content was a lot lower. I made this reference to you earlier, but if someone today released an animated series that looked like the first season of RWBY or the first season of Red versus Blue, they wouldn't have gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, because the standard is just so much higher.
At least not as a company, because there's a certain amount of grace given to an individual.
To an individual, but
right?
But even still, like if you look at if you look at the first season of Immersion, if you look at the first RT animated adventures, a lot of these, like the quality was just a lot less, and so they spent like the overhead was a lot less, so they were able to turn a profit.
Mm-hmm.
But then the standards rose, but the money they got out of it didn't rise either, so it was inevitable that they would collapse. And a show and an institution like Netflix is able to run at a deficit because they have the clout to be the biggest person in town.
And they're taking the loss because they have
and honestly
plans.
My guess is that in 5 years you're going to see advertisements on Netflix. My guess
it's already happening
on Prime. I know.
Has already put in ads.
In 5 years, I think that all of these streaming shows are streaming networks and streaming companies are all basically going to look like cable. In 5 years.
I mean, that was the plan. It's cable
in the
all
long
over
run.
again,
Because
right?
the reason why we had cable was because it was
cable worked.
It
I'm
worked,
sorry. Like
right?
I know
and
it didn't work for like independent
and you
creators
Silicon Valley people disrupted it, but when you disrupted it, you sunk all the money out of it, and it was only inevitable that you would flop. And also, Rooster Teeth was a production company, and it was also a streaming company, and it's very difficult to be both.
Yeah.
Because when you're a streaming company, you get to screw over the production company. You get to drop
you
shows after 2 seasons.
Yourself.
You can't screw yourself over.
That's a funny
way
to put it. Yeah.
The way they conceptualized themselves and the fact that like the standards rose, but the amount of money they could make did not, made the downfall of Rooster Teeth kind of inevitable. And I sort of, and I felt that way since at least 2020.
And so I think that something else that we have to acknowledge that we haven't really talked about yet is the fact that, like, he was handed a very difficult position because he was basically, again, installed to go fix everything that happened, and then COVID happened, right? This man gets here, all right, and they're like, we bullied the animators, and we did all of these bad things, and we're getting clocked for not being transparent. And this guy comes in, and he tries to shift the company culture, and he tries to make things better, and then COVID happens, and everybody's at home, and they're not in their nice fancy setups anymore.
Yeah.
The animators, it's expensive to get the animators set up so they can work from home.
I will say that, like,
I feel like if COVID didn't happen, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Yeah. Again, take that with a grain of salt, but I know that Rooster Teeth's problems lie way before COVID, right? But I think that COVID really did them in because it didn't give it the opportunity for this new leadership to actually change anything, because now he's navigating an entirely different world, like COVID world, post-COVID world. And I will also say that I think that just some of the issues that Rooster Teeth had in general is just the nature from your 5 guys, then you make an actual business. And, like, we know that these things have happened. We've already kind of alluded to some of them. But, you know, even the feel-good stories, if you want to call it that, like Monty sleeping in the studio, right?
And working, like, animating
God
RWBY
bless that man, right? Like, this isn't something, I'm not saying that was bad, but, like, that's the sort of thing that would have been nipped in the bud in a professional setting. Because here's the thing, when you want to do it, I can work for 16 hours straight. Nobody's going to, you know, tell me anything except for my mom, right? Like, because Hunter and I, we are self-employed. We are our own bosses. I checked with my boss. My boss says I can. My boss says I can work for 16 hours straight. My boss is me, right? But that's something that wouldn't happen in the context. And it does happen in, like, Japan and whatever. I'm not saying that the crunch wouldn't happen, but I'm saying that in terms of an actual business, there is somebody that is like, no, you need to go home. Like, work labor laws say that you need to leave, right? And so that's something that if, you know, when they were turning it into a business, more regulations and more structure needed to be in place, because it blurs the line, because me and Arnold and Hunter or whatever, we can all go rogue, basically, right? And so I think that what happened was, due to the nature of how Rooster Teeth started, people were used to going rogue, right? But there's only so long that you can go rogue for before, like, I don't know, the U.S. labor laws are like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
Before the Glassdoor reviews come out and you look really bad. I'll also say that in retrospect, I mean, it's cool that you got Michael B. Jordan. It's cool that you got David Tennant. It's cool that you got, like, Game of Thrones era Maisie Williams. You got Dakota Johnson. Did you really need to get all those people? Like
they had somebody who could speak in another language, right? Like Kazu's voice actor, the crazy things had happened.
You know, it's not like Volume 1 RWBY anymore. You're not getting your receptionist to play your main character. No. But, like, you can just get a voice actress or a voice actor that's good. Don't you also wonder
if that was part of the problem, too? Because, like, okay, I know that you said RWBY would not exist in the same capacity today.
They thought that they were too big to fail, and then they failed.
Oh, but that's not even what I mean. I mean, like, is there not a little bit of charm in, like, the idea that, oh, well, the writer is playing one of the characters, and the secretary has been brought in? And so I think that the other thing with Genlock, too, people want polish, but not too much polish. Like, they don't want to see you and me with, like, high definition movie camera, like, and, you know, like, because
we actually have a
cameraman right behind
IMAX camera,
you know,
strapped
just
to the ceiling.
To the wall. Like, there's polish is necessary, but then, if you also have your brand reliant on a certain degree of, it's not even that parasocial thing anymore. It's just this idea of like, oh, there's all these people that are not professionals trying to do something. And there's a magical underdog story in Lindsay and where they started, and then voicing Ruby Rose, right? Like there's a magical story in that idea that Monty made these characters specifically with his friends in mind. Then you have Genlock, and it's like, well, I made this character with Michael B. Jordan in mind, and I'm like, okay,
like fresh
that's
off of
not really magical
from, like,
anymore.
Creed
right?
and Black Panther and these huge movies. He was expensive.
So like part of the reason too is
someone
just,
else.
you know, the PR thing that we talked about earlier, how I was like Warner Brothers could have PR spinned that movie. I think that too, part of the failure of Genlock is this, like, this is not what Rooster Teeth's known for.
You know, they had serious issues, but they also had issues that I remember a couple years ago, Barbara made a release that they were like changing stuff up and they weren't going to do a lot of personality driven stuff anymore.
Oh, I remember you talking to me about this.
I realized that, like, in retrospect, I think that's what it was. That was a mistake, because part of what made Rooster Teeth such an effective brand, and obviously parasocial relationships are dangerous and questionable, but they do it for, like, people do parasocial relationships for a reason. They're marketable. Like, you feel like, oh, Rooster Teeth, you feel like Achievement Hunter and the Rooster Teeth people are your buddies. Like, RT Life was really great at creating that sense of community and that you like all of these people.
And I will just
getting rid of that and losing a lot of their, like Achievement Hunter especially, over the course of their death predated Rooster Teeth's death. But their death was kind of inevitable because they lost like 80% of the people that worked there.
Yeah.
The people that were the personalities that made the show work with the kind of cast dynamic.
And I will say that...
Bad choice.
I'm not going to talk about specific companies because I try to stay out of mentioning.
We don't know.
But you guys will probably know what company I'm talking about. So I'm a big fan of a specific talent agency that has virtual talents. Not the bad one, the good one. So what they do is that they have 5 talents or so per generation, and that they release those talents like every 2 years or so, right? And they are evidence to some degree. Like, obviously, there's like, oh, well, cute girls and anime and whatever. It's not like Bernie is, you know,
Bernie's a very cute anime girl.
Like,
we've
and
always
all of that
agreed
stuff.
that.
Like, there's that sort of element. But I think that there's some evidence there to suggest that there's a way to handle it and how to bring in new talents in. It's the idea, well, you start with the first generation. Everybody gets attached to that first generation. Then you have the next generation. And something interesting that actually happens with this specific company is they do a collab ban for the first month. The talent must stand on their own, and they're not able to collab with anybody outside of their own generation for the entire first month of their debut. And I think that for some generations, it's a shorter amount of time. It sort of depends, right? But that's how you introduce new people under a unified, like, brand, but they're also their own brand, right? And so I think that that's sort of the problem, like, with, say, Achievement Hunter, is that you have these people that you consider core Achievement Hunter, and then they brought new people into that core, and that's what sort of
and they
old
lost
fans
all
didn't
of,
necessarily...
And they lost basically everyone.
Yeah, and old fans didn't necessarily like that,
previously.
where if they had old Achievement Hunter old, and then Achievement Hunter new.
Yeah.
Maybe if they had framed it like those talent agencies that I'm talking about, it would have been a different situation, because you have the talents have their own group dynamic and have the other group have their own dynamic, and eventually you bring them both together, as opposed to the parasocial feeling of replacement. Because if I'm sure, based on like what I understand about the community in terms of the virtual talents I'm talking about, if you replaced someone in a previous group, people would go because people have graduated from these groups, they have moved on, right? But if you, for example, there is the warden of space that graduated from an agency I'm thinking of, if you then said, we're actually going to bring in a new Warden of Space. They'll have a new design, but we're going to replace the old Warden of Space. People would be like, well, hold the fuck on, right? We don't want that. So I think that that's the issue, is that other companies figured out how to work the parasocial angle, but to maintain privacy. And I think that's also part of the reason. I think that, you know, as they got older, people like Barbara, like I think the reason why Barbara made that announcement, I mean, obviously she was doing it in an official capacity, but I do wonder on a personal level if they wanted to take a step back also for their privacy. That's a difference between the virtual talents, their privacy, the way that new groups are brought in, the way that the relationship is cultivated, and that there's an idea of the kayfabe and the rustling thing, and there's a degree. So there is a way to do it in a healthy way. I'll probably include this somewhere earlier, but like that's the other thing with these talent agencies as well, is that it's super chats and it's merch, and that's kind of something that's something that Rooster Teeth doesn't really have. They don't have a way to send super chats to an individual talent.
It's not surprising to me that Gavin Free, who is a very popular creator and very popular face of Rooster Teeth, kind of stepped back on-screen talent for a while after he had a fan break into his house and try to kill him, right? Sadly, that occurred. I'll also say that it's hard to keep all of these fun, cool people that are funny and do interesting things for your channel and your company when you have a really toxic workplace culture. And a lot of people don't feel welcomed. Like famously, Ray Narvaez Jr. talks about how he was really happy to leave Achievement Hunter. I think a lot of people just grew out of the idea of they wanted more privacy. They became mature. They didn't seek that out in the way they had in the past. I will say that, and this was mentioned by Lana, it's entirely possible that a lot of these groups of people go independent. Like I look at some of the podcasts, or I look at the kind of group, because obviously Achievement Hunter shut down 4 months ago. Which was a heartache for me. But a lot of the people who worked and started Achievement Hunter are still around. It's not impossible to see them go independent and create some kind of new entity. It's not impossible to see Funhouse go independent.
Or they can even buy their name or whatever is happening,
buy the same brand.
Like,
however, that is very difficult. There's a lot of overhead in starting your new company and starting. Typically, you start small and then you grow. Starting medium is very difficult.
I think, you know, because it's...
And that remains to be seen.
I think it'll be about what people can feasibly do because, you know, let's just say gaming has a very different, like, I know that Rooster Teeth, they have, like, sound mixers and even all the people behind the scenes just to get the podcast up. I'm like, oh, well, you know, Hunter and I don't do any of that. Like, we don't have sound mixers and editors and people zooming in on the cameras,
also,
right?
Achievement Hunter, back in their early days, like, the on-screen talent were also the video editors.
Yeah,
you know? So if they move back to that model...
It would be a very skeleton-type operation. But there are some things where I see, like, Barbara could start her podcast. She could build a studio like we have in her house, and she could do it if she wants to. There are other things like immersion where I'm like, I don't think so,
I will say that, like, doing a Let's Play channel whatever thing, like a spiritual successor to Achievement Hunter, which itself has spiritual successors, and Dog Bark and the Gavin and Jeff podcast that I can't say because it has a bad F word in it. That's feasible because the bar to entry there is not too high.
Exactly.
Something
that's what
like immersion, that's like live action sketches, or something like Camp or RWBY or Genlock that's animation is way higher and would be probably infeasible for a startup to do.
Yeah, or like for a single person to negotiate.
So I guess if I have, as someone with some familiarity with how these things tend to work, it would be incredibly difficult to start again.
It's not like they're gonna buy, like, let's just be clear, RWBY is not going to pool together their money to buy the RWBY IP from Warner Brothers. But like
Michael Jones and Gavin Free and Jeff Ramsey and these people, they might be able to start again independent. Funhouse might be able to start again independent, but it would be incredibly expensive. But at least it would be potentially feasible, if very expensive and very difficult, and not basically impossible, like RWBY buying RWBY. Which a lot of naive but well-meaning people online.
Let's do a GoFundMe. So Carrie himself can buy. Not to interrupt you, sorry, but I had this thought earlier and I didn't say it. What's interesting is that you see creatives on TikTok, right? Or whatever, even on YouTube, it's whatever. But the way that they're getting into certain spaces now is like, think about the composers who are now unfortunately composing for Moana 2. Terrified for these girls, love them, terrified though. They got popular because they went on TikTok and they were like, what if Bridgerton had a musical?
Yes.
Right? So taking something that already exists and using that to wedge your way into your internet fame and to get like opportunities to make original content. And so that's sort of the name of the game now. So I think that part of the other reason why sketches and stuff like Hunter is saying aren't as popular is because to some extent a sketch relies on a original idea, or like, you know what I mean?
It
like,
involves scripting and like
it's not even just the scripting and the sets and stuff, but it's also just the fact that like this is an original idea. But now, time and time again, what we see is like, you know, there was another girl whose name I'm totally blanking on, but she wrote like Avatar, The Last Airbender, the musical. That's how she got popular. Then she went on Canada's Got Talent because she's Canadian, and she sung her own original musical theater work. And so when we're talking about like people writing original songs, that kind of doesn't happen anymore. What I see a lot of is people writing an original song and then disguising it by using an anime character. And that's what I see a lot in cover spaces. Like there's somebody that I follow specifically where they write their own original music, and I'm like, okay, I can see how possibly this is connected to what these two characters, but it's vague enough that I'm like, no, I think you just wrote this because maybe it inspired
have
you,
a lot
maybe,
to do with
but it doesn't
Jinx
really
from
have a lot to
Arcane,
do with her,
like,
right?
yeah.
Like, and so, but there's somebody else that I like on the flip side where what they do is they write Disney villain songs for the princesses. And like, that's a genius idea. I've wanted to do that for such a long time, and they beat me to it, I guess. And so again, just to reiterate this idea of like, yeah, that's what the name of the game is now. You find the thing that somebody already made, and you make your own original thing based on that.
You do
that's
commentary.
The only way that you can
that's
get
what
in,
YouTube is now.
right? And that's what I meant by when earlier I said it's not just commentary, but there's a commentary in everything.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I meant by commentary in everything. It's that everything somebody does is now like, you have to piggyback on something else, even if it's something just like a rewrite of a song.
It's hard to be your own original thing anymore.
Yeah.
And I think and honestly, I worry about, this whole conversation, like our conversations about Rooster Teeth is just a really good example of all of these other issues that are occurring in the creative industries. And honestly, either these creative industries just get crappier and crappier and more like navel-gazy and less interesting and less compelling, or it has to like radically change.
Yeah.
Like YouTube as it exists now is not sustainable. I think Netflix and these streaming services as they exist now are not sustainable.
Yeah.
I even look at like creator funded streaming services like Nebula, which I think is really compelling, but I also wonder like how sustainable
what's
is that?
going on with them
like,
too?
Like fundamentally, I think we're gonna have to just get used to ads again. We're gonna have to get used to like
or paying a lot of money
people,
so you don't see the ads,
right? Or like physical media. They mentioned that in the end of the Rooster Teeth thing that there's physical media.
Well, they said that you should make sure to buy the physical media because you never know, right?
Which I have with RWBY. I've slowly been picking up Blu-rays.
I guess like just as I don't know, because we kind of went somewhere. We're going somewhere, right? I am hopeful because we have another 60 days in the sense of like they aren't shut down. Like a lot of people thought that they were terminated tomorrow, right? So
which happens
as
sometimes.
RWBY fans, right? Like we still have RWBY Beyond to look forward to, and
it's going to be a good
things.
60 days, and there's probably going to be a final live stream.
So I feel I feel much more hopeful now that we had seen the live stream. I'm glad that we waited to make a video. But I will say, like, in terms of what Hunter is talking about, in general, it is, first of all, the job market in general is very difficult right now, right?
I feel so terrible for the people who are out of a job.
Like I already mentioned with my mom. My mom's not even in an entertainment capacity.
Economy's
and,
just not great right now.
Everything's just really shit. But, you know, as somebody who graduated with backup plans, but also graduated with a musical theater degree, like, I'm not really feeling great right now. Like, I don't want to make this about me, because it should be about the people that, lost
But, like,
their
yeah, it's
jobs. But
people
like
that
as a young
yeah.
creative person, and I'm sure, you know,
It's
Aaron,
scary.
for example, our friend Aaron who animated for RWBY Volume 9, like they have a job right now, but I'm sure that they're kind of feeling it too, where they're like, oh, like this is the life of an artist, and maybe the life of an artist has never been so bad, because even in the Renaissance you had the church paying for
you know?
Michelangelo to
We
go
don't have
paint or whatever. So
we don't have the Medicis anymore.
No,
We have to
so-
be our own Medicis, and it's like either audiences dramatically change their relationship, or it's just going to get worse and worse until it dramatically. And I hope maybe if it collapses, maybe it's built back for the better. But I really don't know.
Yeah.
And Rooster Teeth's demise is just an example of that. And on a personal level, I'm sad to see her go. You know?
I mean,
even if like I haven't been like, besides the animated stuff, I haven't really been watching a lot of Rooster Teeth stuff since 2020. I slowly started. Because like a lot of people that I cared about left the company, and Achievement Hunter changed a lot, and I watched a lot of Achievement Hunter, and I got a little teary-eyed when Achievement Hunter ended. But I'm sad to see her go. I never got to go to an RTX.
Yeah, I know. You were supposed to go that one time, and then you didn't come with us. And
long story, but
like,
just little things like.
And like I
don't know.
You know, just to talk about RTX, because why not? Like at this point, this video is okay. So I went to RTX my last time, right before COVID.
It must
have been during COVID, but like
shortly
things
after
were a little
COVID. You were wearing masks.
So we had masks, right? But
it was like Camp RT was what it was.
So
the theme.
I had school. Okay, but I had gotten special permission to go because I had already paid for the trip before school, even though we weren't really supposed to take any time off. And I remember, like, I had fun, but I was so exhausted because if you guys don't know, and I talk about this sometimes, but like, I was like up at 5 a.m. and sometimes didn't get home until 8 o'clock at night. Like, it was a very intense the program that I did. So I remember like falling asleep at 6 o'clock. Like, it's Arnold and I's anniversary because we met during RTX. Yeah. So every RTX is our anniversary, right? It's our anniversary, and I fall asleep at 5 o'clock and sleep 18 hours until we wake up at 8 o'clock the next day because I was so tired. And obviously there's nothing that I could have done about that, but you know, in hindsight, you have this feeling of, did I spend enough time with my friends? Really? Like, I definitely didn't. Like, first of all, I definitely did. Like, I went out to lunch with people. I went out to lunch with, again, the friends that I do have that work at Rooster Teeth, like I mentioned already. Like, I spent time with them, but, like, I also fell asleep at 5 p.m. like a fucking senior citizen.
And you're looking
so
back at it, and you wonder, like it's because that's
what if I like took another hit of my Concerta and just stayed up all night to spend time with
that's
people,
a good
right?
idea. Amphetamines. But yeah, it's like, but I think that's kind of like, obviously, you know, this isn't a person who died; it's a corporation.
Right,
corporation doesn't matter.
But just the moment that they created to facilitate us to get together.
Or when things end, you experience grief, and it's natural to look back on. And I say I never went to RTX. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think of all these things, and yeah, you almost wonder, like, I didn't appreciate, you didn't realize when the good times were until they passed by.
Yeah, and I mean, even Carrie said that in the stream, right? Like, you really have to cherish the good moments that you have in your life because you don't know when they're gone.
I didn't realize I didn't realize how special the idea that there would just be RWBY.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that, like, I didn't realize how special just having friends that I made, like you and other people who loved RWBY and loved these shows.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how special that was at the moment.
And we obviously supported the show in the way that
we both thought it would be very funny to
we didn't coordinate it at all.
Actually. We both separately were like, this would be kind of amusing
10th anniversary shirt, right?
To wear the RWBY 10th anniversary shirt.
But yeah, like, obviously we supported the show in the way that we could, but like, you know, on the stream last night, unfortunately I misheard one of their names, but there were two very young, probably our age, honestly, two boys that were on, and I don't know what they do. I don't know how they got there.
They had a show called Best Friend Team or whatever.
Or Best Friends Today, I think it was.
Best Friends Today.
Yeah, and so I was like, those guys are fucking funny. Like, I would have watched them. Like, I didn't realize find them after.
Because they collabed with a different YouTube channel I liked, and I didn't realize they were Rooster Teeth.
Yeah, and so, like, that's kind of the thing, too, is, like, I don't know how well how Rooster Teeth may have advertised some of these people.
That's the thing.
That's the thing. It's like, oh, well, that's actually something that maybe I would have been interested in. Or like, they did the Minecraft thing. I liked that. Arnold and I watched the Minecraft survival block island.
Well, that's the other thing.
Fun.
That's the other thing that I'm really concerned with Rooster Teeth that I feel like I should have brought up earlier was that, so currently there's something you can go called the Archive of Pimps, which is a reference to the Tower of Pimps, which is a Achievement Hunter reference, that they're trying to take all of Rooster Teeth's material and archive it somewhere. But and that's easy for stuff they posted on YouTube. But when you look at stuff that was a first only, like Neon Konbini, or Achievement Hunter, or the Hardcore series.
Impossible. The download tools exist to do it, but
I just look at that stuff and it's concerning because it's like, hey, when I hope that or the Strange Place or the Block Island or all these things that were, Rooster Teeth first only, like the bonus podcasts, I really hope that people are taking those and archiving them because otherwise in 60 days, they become lost media.
And people are working on it. Even,
I really hope,
the Internet Archive had an archive of the stream that they did last night. You know what I mean? So people, But I understand your
And
concern,
also physical
right?
media. But I also worry about, I have the first 6 seasons of RWBY in physical media, but, do those include the World of Remnant? Does that include RWBY Beyond? Does that include... the volume 9 DVD.
We should probably check our DVDs and collect some DVDs we don't have. I don't have volume 9.
I wanted to buy volume 9, and I need to buy 9 and 8 and 7. But does that include the Fairy Tale of Remnant stuff? I don't know. And you worry about a lot of the stuff, and you really hope that it doesn't get lost because I think that stuff was meaningful, and I returned to a lot of Rooster Teeth stuff, and it's nerve-wracking, frankly.
So, I know, it's sad, right? And again, it's not, it's not about the company, it's what the company facilitated for the people that work there, but then also
Rooster Teeth did a lot of bad things, and at the end of the day, they were, I'm not defending Rooster Teeth. I'm very fond of Kaden Jensen and a lot of people like Mika Burton who are really harmed by that company. I don't want to suggest that this was this perfect place where bad things didn't happen, but I'm not going to pretend that it didn't matter to me, and I'm not going to pretend that it didn't matter to a lot of people and that what they did wasn't very special in a million different small ways. Yeah. In my own life, I think about this is personal. But I in high school, I had a very rough time. Before I met you, I wasn't going to class a lot of times. I was very mentally ill. I was severely depressed, and I stayed home most days. And I would just watch Achievement Hunter, because Achievement Hunter was over the course of a video.
Hunter,
over the course of a video, I'd feel okay. I think RWBY had such an outsized effect on how I view myself. I've said this story before, but part of how I realized I was trans was I was reading RWBY fan fiction, and I was so obsessed with RWBY, and I'm like, man, why am I obsessed with these girls? What does this say about me? And I realized because on a certain level, I yearned to not be a man. And so many friends, you're my best friend, and part of our friendship and how it's maintained is doing this together.
We have Barbie games to do.
We have other things, but
RWBY,
that was an early thing we really bonded over. And outside of you, friends that maybe I don't talk to anymore, but those memories still mattered a lot to me, and that matters. Yeah. And Rooster Teeth matters, and I'm sad to see it go, but it happened, and that's important, and that's good.
Yeah, and that's what I, really wanted to convey on Twitter, right? Is that there are people that the trajectory of their lives have changed because of the content that people made,
and
or
the
shows
and
the community
and the art and
so,
things that really matter.
Even if the company doesn't exist anymore, it's like you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, box, right?
RWBY's still Avatar: The Last Airbender had a new episode since 2008. You still see fan art, you still see fan communities, people still care about that thing. Yeah. I think Rooster Teeth will live on in the hearts and minds of the people that it mattered to.
And I think that's with anything, right? you change, like, I saw this Tumblr post once, and I can't exactly remember, but, like, you know, the friend that taught you how to use chopsticks, or, like, the friend that taught you how to season your ramen. I don't know why there was so much food, but, like, you know, the friend that introduced you to the band that you hate. Even that stuff formulates your personality,
I don't talk to
right?
the person anymore that showed me RWBY, but, you know, they still matter a lot to me. All these, like, you know, you are the sum total of your experiences.
Exactly, yeah.
And those are big experiences of the actual people you know, and the things that you enjoyed and that you cared about and that you were passionate about, like Rooster Teeth.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, just on my end, since Hunter shared a personal story, I'll share a personal story too, but just, like, first of all, meeting you, obviously, you introduced me to RWBY in the first place, and I was kind of like, I don't like this.
I distinctly remember, I was like, watch it, it's good, watch it. Like it. And you're like, no, my friends talk about it, I already know.
Like,
first episode, they were hooked.
Well, yeah, but I at first I wasn't, like, a fan of the idea of watching it. I can't even remember why. I guess it's just, I don't like 3D animation, right?
So
I think
you said your friends talked about it, but I sat
like,
you down in my bedroom on an iPad.
Like, my friends say it's okay, but, like, I don't like 3D. I want that 2D. Like, I don't know. So I was a hater or something.
But I remember I sat you down with an iPad and I made you watch the first.
You know, I had my channel before, but RWBY is really the foundation of what
it became.
Yeah, because, like, oh, I did Kingdom Hearts and I did whatever and this and that, but the conceit of this was like, well, what if we did game theory, to mention somebody else that's retiring in a more chosen way, right? Like, what if we did game theory but RWBY? Like, do people do that? And, like, yeah, they kind of did for, like, cartoons and other stuff, but it wasn't as, like, the actual theorizing component, I don't think, was that. Like, obviously, I'm not saying that we invented talking about cartoons, right? But, like, we came up with the idea in our own heads to do that based on what we saw people doing for gaming at that time, and I'm sure people were doing it for cartoons, but I had never seen that because I was much more of a gaming person. I knew people made game theory. I did not know that people made, Hunter theory about where the manga's going or whatever, right? And so, you know, there was that, and there's also, like, I had a hard time too in high school, but it was more that I remember, like, coming back from my first RTX, and I think I'm a completely different person when I got back from that RTX compared to before I went there, because, you know, to be around people who actually care about what you have to say. Like, I have Hunter, obviously, but, you know, that's something I really struggled with, I guess, personally in elementary school. And then, well, in high school, I probably could have tried a little harder. In hindsight, like, as you grow up, you realize that part of it was probably your fault. But, like, you know, because of elementary school, I was kind of like, yeah, nobody gives a shit about what I care about. So why would I even try to make friends? Like, it's already been proven that, like, when I speak out or when I get too passionate about things, that people think I'm annoying, so I'll just shut the fuck up. And I basically shut the fuck up until I met Hunter. That's basically how things went, right? And so, you know, to have this, first of all, like, to have the confidence to be able to speak in terms of the YouTube channel, but going to RTX and seeing that that's not, like, because I've always felt like, oh, the channel is where I can be myself, and then in real life, I'm not myself, right? Because people think I'm annoying, so I can be annoying on YouTube. And so RWBY facilitated this idea of, first of all, us speaking our mind, but then that in real life, people would also want to hear me speak, because I think how many RTXs did I go to? But one of them I was on a panel speaking, right? At least. But I think that the very first time just meeting other people and that those people would listen to me, right? It was, you know, very impactful as somebody who kind of, like, you know, like, elementary school selective mutism almost, where I just would not talk unless spoken to sometimes for, like, months and months on end, not at home, but just in that sort of setting, right? And going from that to us expanding to other things, like, because RWBY paid for the Disney cruise, you know? RWBY paid for, like, to some extent, for these lights, for these lights, for the stuff that we have, right? Like,
I mean,
without, you know, Hunter and I do other things, right? We're not going to be broke without RWBY.
Look at my skin now and some of those older videos, like,
you know, I don't want people to think that we're, like, in danger or something, because I think,
we'll be okay.
as opposed to Arnold, who I think Arnold won't mind me saying that Arnold's like freaking out. Like he's absolutely shell-shocked, because something Hunter and I did really early is we went to things that weren't RWBY, like Miraculous and Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss and whatever. Like, you know, my Code Geass reaction, I think, has like 50K views, and I'm like, I have no idea where you guys came from, and I don't think that you stayed, but like, that's fine, right? Like, there's always been other stuff that we've done that has been popular, but RWBY, at least, was the nucleus for that. For some other people, that RWBY was the one and only, and so now that they have to pivot to other things, it's really scary.
I don't know what the RWBY haters, because there's some people that like made a whole like, I'm not going to name names because I don't really pay attention, but I think there are people out there that made a whole like living off of just crapping on RT, and now they've kind of won.
Horrible VTuber companies to talk about now. RWBY generated, you know how they're like, oh, whenever Taylor Swift tours, she generates 1% of the economy? Like, RWBY did generate jobs for people that did not work there, right? Like, Hunter and I, and especially Arnold, like, I think, you know, Arnold will probably say when he makes his own video, but, like, everything that Arnold has now is because Rooster Teeth gave him that shout out and really, you know, amplified his voice as a fan and showed, like, yeah, we do care about you guys' reactions and stuff like that. I don't think Eddie will mind me saying, because his name has been in my videos, but, like, Eddie Rivas has pledged to my Patreon before, and I feel like that there's no, like, first of all, I just think that that's insane, but I feel like that there's no, like, how often does that happen? Isn't it kind of crazy to think about that one of the writers was like, yeah, your reactions are worth seeing early, a couple days early than they normally would be. Like, you know, again, just the feeling that, like, our voices were important, or they were valued by people. Yeah, I now this is what I'm gonna get emotional, right? Because I really didn't want to make this about us, because obviously, like, people just lost their fucking jobs. But I can't stress enough, if somebody who did lose their job happens to be watching, that the impact that you made on us, it does not end because the company is over, and it surpasses into the future. I'm always going to, like, I'll tell my grandkids that Eddie Rivas pledged to my Patreon, as I'm accepting my Tony, that's what I'll think about, that, like, that gave me the courage to continue, whatever. And, like, you know, I said this on Twitter, but RWBY's the reason why, like, I used to write novels in high school that were pretty bad, but, like, I know, quit.
I read them.
I didn't quit, but I stopped after a while. RWBY is what got me into writing, and I think Hunter would agree that my writing
improved
is
dramatically.
Very dramatically improved. Right? And, like, got me writing
dramatically.
Again. I started to learn how to draw. Like, there's just all of these
But that was
things
a similar thing
where
like,
you can
with me
identify these particular, I don't know, like, just these particular things that, like, yeah, I probably
That's
wouldn't
how you
have done
cut
that
your teeth
again.
in writing.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel this, like, I've also written fanfiction for RWBY, and that was the first show I ever watched where I thought, like, I should do a fanfiction.
Yeah, like, I think, you know, that's what I worry about, I guess. Like, just, I said this a couple months ago, actually, like, way before this happened, but I'm just worried that everything I love happens to be the stuff that I loved as a teenager, and I will never love anything that intensely again. And I don't think that that's actually true, but I think that, like, it is getting harder because of everything that we've already talked about. Shows only get 8 episodes or whatever. Like, it's just, you know, I love Kingdom Hearts. I love Disney and Barbie, and that's what I talk about on my other channel. I love, like, weird Spider Riders stuff and stuff that is long-ended. We have other passions for things, but RWBY is just one of those things where I feel we could make a Has-Been Hotel theory. Right? Like, I could make one. If you asked me to, if you paid me to, not just dragging my feet paid me to, but, like, I have an idea, right? But, like, with RWBY, it's, I wake up in the middle of the night and have this intense brain rot that Neo is going to turn into a tree for no reason, right? And, like, these dreams about the Neo Manor, right? Like, that was an insane thing to have happen during our reaction. And Jin being the relic in the statue.
Yeah,
We're never gonna forget
That's going in. I forgot about that. That's going in the Hall of.
Like, in the fact that people were like,
fame.
nah, that's stupid because we didn't used to have relic beings back then, right? Like,
I was
those
talking.
are the things that I'm like, yeah, like this show in a good way literally like brought me out of my sleep sometimes with ideas, and it's like, I'm sure that I'll find that thing again sometime, but RWBY was just that special thing, and I'm like, I hate this feeling that I'm never going to find anything that makes me feel that gives me that feeling again. But I'm sure that we will, and I also think that feeling will persist through the fan content and stuff. Like, we watched a bunch of good RWBY fan content yesterday, and I felt that again, like that will to keep writing because of that. You know?
This was after we did the videos theorizing what would happen in the RWBY Beyond stuff, and I talked to my partner, and they were like, "Wow, you seem chipper," and I'm like, "You know what it is?"
Yeah.
Because I talked about RWBY for an hour, and yeah,
Yeah, and so I'm sure, like, I don't think that this is the end of our thoughts. By the way, I don't know if you've noticed,
I'm sure over the course
have
a
thoughts.
lot.
I'm sure that we're going to have
More
at least
thoughts.
one more thought, especially when the
over
company...
the course of 60 days.
Yeah, actually shuts down in 60 days. But I thought it was really important for us to come on here to talk about things and to just... The other reason is just because people are, like, everybody wants to know, right? I didn't want to start uploading, like, fucking Arcane and for you guys to be like, okay, like, Jinx just blew up a bunch of people, but what about Rooster Teeth, right? And so I felt like that we needed to talk about it, but I also feel like, you know, for us, for our sake, it's something that we needed, and, like, to our community, the Calxiyn community, if you will. I think that I'm feeling, again, a lot more hopeful now that we know about the 60 days, now that we know what the plan is. And I think that even though it's sad, I think Neef said something earlier on Twitter. He said that, like, I don't think he said the no more tears thing. Maybe he did, but he basically said, like, Monty would want us to keep moving forward. And that really, that's what really got to me. And it was the sentiment of, like, don't cry now. Like, we still, like, we have to keep pushing onward. And I think, basically, like, right? And so I think that, as much as, like, we are also sad, I think that that's something important, too, for us to quickly get over our sadness so that we can be supportive to the people that actually lost their jobs, right? Because they're the ones that really need the support right now. And I think I tried to mention this as, like, a one more tangent, but then I decided to save it. So Chelsea did say they are going to make a master list, an opt-in master lit, like, so, you know, the random, like, tech intern, he may not want his social medias to be known, or, like, the financial manager of Rooster Teeth accounting, like, they may not exactly want to be involved in all that, but for anyone that wants to be found, Chelsea said that they are going to make a master list of people's social media accounts so they can find them. And my Discord server, I've been trying to, like, manually catalog people's tweets, which has not been very fun. So I hope that, you know, they'll get that list out soon. They were supposed to send out an email summarizing. Maybe we've already gotten that email while we've been talking. But if there's any other significant development, Hunter and I will be back. But I'm really glad we waited until they talked on the stream, because that, like, there was a lot. And, you know, I encourage you to seek out that stream, too. Not to go see people cry, but it was very heartfelt and how people were talking about their experiences. And I think even though it was sad, it was also kind of motivating to be able to see people, like, especially Carrie, right? Because obviously Carrie. I care more about the RWBY side of things.
Jeff and Jack, their interactions were really special.
Like, they're not giving up, right? And that... there's still more to come, and just the advice that they gave to the fans and stuff like that. I think that stuff, I think that they probably just took down the stream to cut it up and edit it, because there was a very long sound check at the beginning and all that stuff. I'm assuming it'll be back, maybe?
It's already
in some
been
capacity.
Archived
It's been archived,
so.
But I encourage you to go seek it out at the very least. If you care. I think that you should actually watch the full thing. But yeah, this has been us. Yeah, usually I would do a little fun outro, but I don't think that this is the fun
this doesn't warrant
for the vibe. If you guys want to support us, again, you can check out the Patreon, the Ko-fi, as I've already, like, mentioned and alluded to throughout this video. Like, that's the best way to support us. And if you know, like, that's the only way. Basically, ads don't really do a whole lot right now. So if you guys enjoy what Hunter and I do, you know, please consider supporting us. I'm not usually out here, like, begging, right? That's why I don't bring up the fact that my mom lost her job or the fact that I haven't been able to find musical theater casting. Yeah, exactly. But that's why I try not to bring it up because I don't want to make people feel bad. But then hearing Jordan Levin say that last night, I was like, well, maybe I should bring it up to people because people may not know. People may think that I'm like Arnold's housewife and that he like pays for my needs or something because people don't know they know that we're together, but like they don't know the context of our situation and they know that Arnold works full time. They may have these misconceptions about our current situation. So please don't have any misconceptions. I am in desperate need of stable employment if you're looking to cast somebody who can sing in a musical theater capacity. Or just Hunter and I take commissions and all of that sort of stuff. So consider supporting us if you want to. But yeah, first and foremost, make sure as the Rooster Teeth employees progress and launch Patreons, like Casey Lee Williams launched a Patreon, like we'll try to spotlight those things too as they happened on Twitter. So please keep track of that if you would like. And we will see you guys later on. Bye.